In this video, we're going to be converting our previously made to-do list into a full stack application. So let's go ahead and actually sign up. I'm going to set my name to Bob. Email address is going to be webdevwithron@gmail.com. And the password, we're going to just set this to 123. And as we can see, here is our to-do list. And of course, after this video, with this knowledge, you're going to be able to turn any of your React project into a Next.js project with a database connected to it. So if we refresh, we can see our new user over here. And of course, the password is hashed, which makes everything a lot more secure. And we did add a few features, and one of them would be if you misclicked a to-do, now you're able to add it back if you ever needed to. And of course, if you had, for example, two to-dos that were the same, so let's just say finish work, and then you had something else like do homework, and then you have to finish your work again and reload, the other one doesn't get removed also, so we can do all of that. But of course, if we log out and then we log back in again, everything gets saved. And of course, it's not going to be in the local storage anymore. It's going to be in the database. So let's refresh. And over here, if we go to to-dos, here are going to be all of our to-dos, and everything is being saved. So make sure that you watch this whole video, because at the very end we are going to be fixing some things and also adding some features. But before we get started, make sure you like the video if you like it, subscribe to this channel to not miss any upcoming content like this. Comment down below if you have any questions or if you have anything else that you'd like to say. But now let's get started. As always, go to your desktop, right click anywhere, press on open in terminal. This will open your terminal, and we're going to run npx create next app at latest. And we're going to call this next to do list, and we're going to press on enter. I have a new version, so I'm going to say yes and press on enter. And we're going to say no to TypeScript, yes to ESLint, yes to Tailwind, no to source, yes to app router, no to TurboPack, and no to import alias. And while it's installing, I would recommend going down in the details below and finding this GitHub repository. And then you're going to want to go to commits, and then where it says initial commit, we're going to go to the very right and press on browse repository at this point. And all that we're going to do in here is go to the app folder, go to page, and we're going to copy this in just a second. So now that it's done, let's cd to next to do list, and then we're going to open this in VS Code, and then we're going to go to the app folder, go to page.js, copy this, and then paste it in here. And the only reason that we're doing this is because in the previous to-do list, it was created with Bootstrap, but I changed it to Tailwind, so now it works pretty well. So let's open this in terminal, and we should have a few errors, but let's install everything first. And then we're going to run npm run dev. Let's open it. And the first issue should be some of the styles, and then also should be getting an error for the background, but we're not getting it right now. But what we're going to do now is go to the globals.css, copy this, go back in here, paste everything in the globals.css, and now we're getting the public background.svg error. So now we're going to go to the public folder, and then we're going to press on the background.svg. We're going to download it, and then we're also going to download another one, which I forgot to put in the initial commit. So we're going to go back to the final commit, and then we're going to go to public, and then find this signout.svg, and then we're also going to download that. Now that we have those two, we're going to make this smaller. We can drag and drop them to the public folder, so signout, same goes with the background. And now if we go back to our app, we can see that everything works, and if we type anything, we can see that it gets saved in the local storage. So let's go to the application, local storage, and here it is. Of course, we can remove it, and this is going to be our starting point. So what I'm going to do is have them side by side like this. And the first thing that we're going to do is actually clean this up, because we have our to-do over here at the bottom, and then of course the actual to-do list container. So of course we don't want any of that. Let's go ahead and create a new folder called components, and we're going to have a file in here called index.js, and you're going to see why this file is going to be useful later on. But we're going to create our to-do.js, and then let's just write export default function to do, and then we're going to have our props in here. So let's go down to the very bottom, copy all of this, paste it in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and also copy the props, so we can just copy this, and then of course we're gonna paste them right in here. And we're going to get an error because we can see that to do has already been declared. That's because we have them at the very bottom over here. And we're going to go to the index.js and write import to do from to do. And we're also going to export to do just like that. So let's go ahead and remove this to do from the very bottom. And then at the very top, we're going to import to do from components, and hopefully everything should work again. So there it is. And before we actually add our database and that kind of stuff, one thing you want to fix is to go to the to do, and then here, I'm going to close that. We're going to change or add something to the class. So the first thing that we're going to do is, hold on, let's just create a to do. So the first thing that we're going to add is a cursor pointer, and we're going to cut this out, paste it back in here, and we're going to check if it's done. So is done equals to true. Then we're also going to add a done in here, else it's going to be blank. So you'll see why in a second. So when we press on it, it turns to gray so that we can see the difference between the ones that are done and are not. And we have this in both of them. So what I'm going to do is go to the globals.css, search up to do, and over here to do where, and then let's see what we have in here. So we have a paragraph with a to do. So to do paragraph. So there it is. I'm just going to cut this out, and then wherever we have the to do dot done, what I'm going to do is actually go down here, paste this in here, but we're going to change this to do dot done and then paragraph, so that we wouldn't need the paragraph to also have a class of done for this to work. So now we can remove this, and it should work the exact same way. So when we press on that, we have a line through, and something happened there, but yeah, there we go. So that's actually another thing that we're going to have to fix. So if we have two to-dos with the same name or same text, it's going to cancel both of them out because there's no IDs or that kind of stuff which we could use to differentiate them, but we're going to have all of that whenever we're done with our database. So let's go ahead and start with that. As always, we're going to create our new environment file here, so .env. And we're going to have two variables. So one is going to be MongoDB underscore URL. The other one is going to be the JWT secret underscore key. And of course, all this is in my login signup template. So if you want to go ahead and watch that whole video and learn about how all of this stuff works, because I'm not going to be able to go over all of this in too much depth, then you can go ahead and do that. But we can close this for now, and we're going to actually open MongoDB Atlas. So I'm going to open it and write MongoDB Atlas, and we're going to log in or sign up with Google. And of course, if you don't already have an account, then make sure that you create an account and then you create a cluster. So this right here. And we can see that mine is currently paused because I haven't used it in a while, but of course this doesn't really matter. Once you actually have your cluster, if you haven't watched my previous videos, then make sure you go to network access and then set the IP address to this, which will give you access to access the database from anywhere if you have the right credentials. But we're going to go to clusters, connect, drivers, and we're going to copy this right here. Now we're going to go back to the environment file, paste in the MongoDB URL. Can actually make this larger, and let's press on done. We're going to go to database access, and then if you don't have a database user, make sure you add one, and then you press on add built-in role, Alice admin, and create your password over here, and then the name. For me, it's going to be admin, and every time I actually edit the password, generate a new one, and then I copy it. Now press on update user, because over here we can see that this is where the username would go, and then here would be the password. So that's the password that was just generated. And so now we can go back to the cluster, browse collection, and this is going to be the collection from the previous video, which was the login signup template, and we can see that all the passwords are hashed and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and actually leave it, and we're going to create a new database. We're going to call this to-do list DB. You can call it however you want. You can just do to-do list. You can do to-do DB, doesn't matter, but make sure that you actually remember it. So let's just do to-do list and then underscore DB. Collection name is just going to be users, and I'm going to copy this, press on create, and here is our collection of to-do list DB and users. And Now in here, we're going to remove all of this up to the question mark, and we're going to paste in the name of to-do list DB, or whatever name you chose. And for the JWT secret key, I'm just going to set this to 123 for now, because we're not going to be using it right now. But now we can close the environment file, and we're going to go ahead and create our folders. So the first one is going to be dbconfig, which is going to have a file of index.js. So let's go back to the dbconfig, index.js, and then here we're going to be connecting to the database. And to do that, we do have to install a new dependency, so npm install, and we're going to be installing Mongoose. So let that install, and once it's done, we can go ahead and run import Mongoose from Mongoose, and then here we're going to create our async function, which we're going to be using in our API endpoints to connect to the database. So connect, and then here we're going to have a try and catch method in case we have any errors along the way. So here we're just going to console log the error. We can do err error, and then here we're going to write mongoose.connect, and here is where our environment file comes from. So process.env. Let's just go back in here, copy this, and then paste it right in here. MongoDB URL. Then we're going to create a variable called connect, which is going to be a Mongoose connection. So mongoose.connection, just like that. And then here we're going to write connect.on connected. So when it's connected, we're going to console log that, or let's fix this. We're going to console log, let's fix all of these errors, but we're going to console log connected to MongoDB. I'm going to uncapitalize the T over here. And then we're going to have another one, which would be on an error. So .on error, we're going to be getting in the error, and then we're going to be console logging the error. And another thing that we're going to do is actually, we're going to disconnect. So process.exit. And this is going to be it for the dbconfig. We're going to close the app, the dbconfig, and we're going to create another folder called models. And this is going to be the most interesting part here out of this whole setup before actually using the database. But of course, here we're going to be creating our user model. So user model.js. And of course, here we're going to be importing Mongoose from Mongoose. And the first thing that we're going to do is create our user schema, which is going to be a new mongoose.schema. And here we're going to have all of our different variables. So for this project, we're going to have their name, which will be a string. Then we're going to have an email of string, just like that. I'm not sure what's going on, but email of string, password of string. And then we're going to have our to-dos, which is going to be an array of to-do schema. And this to-do schema is going to be another schema that we're going to create above. So const to-do schema, which is going to be new mongoose.schema. And so we're going to have our to-do with a string. And then, of course, we're going to have our ID, which will be a number. Now that we have both of our schemas, we're going to create our user, which is going to be mongoose.models.users. And if we don't have any of that, then we're going to create it. So mongoose.model, mongoose.model, and then we're going to go to users and then user schema. And then under that, all that we're going to do is export default user. And this will be it for the user model. And later on, we are going to have to make another one, which is going to be the helpers for the JWT token, but we're going to do that later on. So now let's go to the app folder, create our API folder, and start working on the APIs and actually creating our signup and login pages. Before we go ahead and work on the API, we're going to go ahead and create our signup page first. So signup. Here we're going to create a page.js file. And we're going to go ahead and copy this from the Next.js signup login template. You can find this in the description below. So go to app, signup, page.js, and copy this file. We're going to paste it in here, and let's see if it worked. So we're going to go to signup. and there it is. And so we're going to go back and we're getting an error, and it's something to do with Axios, as we can see over here. So what we're going to do is go in here and run npm install Axios, which should solve the error. So let's reload. And now we're back. So sign up to your account, email, address, password, and we're actually missing the name. So let's go ahead and add it in here. Scroll down. And for the name input, we're just going to go ahead and copy this right here and then paste it above it. And here we're going to change this to name. All of this. So email, 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 email. We're going to change this to name. And then here we're going to set the name to .target and then user.name. That should be it. So if we write something in here, okay, it's all going to be different. So that works. And if we go to the handle submit, I'm going to go over this real quick, but all that's happening here is we're checking that user.email and user.password are not empty. So now we're going to add user.name. So if none of the inputs are empty, then we're going to do this. Else, we're going to set an error message, and this error message is just going to be the text, but if we scroll somewhere here, error message, so this span right here would be the error message. So let's say we had one that doesn't have anything in it, and we'll press on sign up. We're going to get this error message of please fill all the fields, and we set it up over here, so please fill all the fields. So this is going to be for the error message. And we can say else no user.name. But here we're setting the error message to blank in case we had one before. So if we comment this out, we can see that we have the error message, and then now if we press on sign up, we're still going to have an error message because we didn't clear it. So if we do this again, we can see that the message disappears. And here we're going to have a response. So we're sending an API request to API signup. And then of course we're sending in the user. Then if response.status equals to 200, then we're going to be pushing the user to the home page. But of course, if we should be getting an error somewhere here. So if we inspect, go to console, not sure what's going on here, but 404 not found. So of course we have to create that API endpoint. So sign up in the API folder. Here we're going to have our route.js file, and we can create this one from scratch. So unless you want to go ahead and also copy and paste it from the same repository, but here we're going to start by importing next response, and then we're going to export const host, which is going to be an async function. We're going to be getting in the request. And then actually we do have to import a few more things. So of course we got to import connect from Mongoose or dbconfig. And then we're going to be import the user from user model. And then for bcrypt.js and JWT, we're going to work on that in a bit. But of course, first thing that we have to do is connect to the database. So connect. We're going to run our try and catch method as always in case we get any errors. Here we're going to console log error, and then we're going to return a next response.error. But the first thing that we're going to be getting is the name, email, and password that we are passing. So password, which will be await request.json. Let's go ahead and console log all of them. So console.log, name, email, and password, and then we're going to return a next response, or else we're going to have an error.json. And then here we're just going to write a message of user created successfully. And then we're going to pass in a status of 200, which we're going to be looking for in there. Let's go back into the page, and we're not going to be pushing the user yet because we want to see if this works. So the name, let's just say web dev. Email address would be 123@gmail.com. password was also 123. And now if we press on sign up, we're getting all of our values. So webdev123@gmail.com and then 123. So now that that works, we can go back to the route.js file. And the first thing that we're going to do, or actually before we do that, we can see that connected to MongoDB worked, because in the environment file, again, it's using this URL to access it. And if it's not working, then make sure that your username and password are correct and that you actually have this database and collection. But we're going to close this. And the first thing that we're going to do is create a user variable, which will check if we have a user. So await user dot find one with the email. And if we do have a user with that email, then we're going to want to go ahead and respond. So if user, we're going to return a next response.json with a message of user already exists, and then with a status of 400. So if we don't have a user already with that email, here we're going to create our const new user, which would be new user. Of course, here we're going to have the name, email, password, and then we're going to have our to-dos. We can actually create a few basic ones so that whenever a new user signups for the first time, they have a few default to-dos. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We're going to have one with a to-do of create your first to-do, and then it's going to have an ID of 1. And we're going to create a few more later on, but this is going to be good enough for now. And now that we have all of this, if we go ahead and console log this user, so new user, let's reload everything. Webdev@gmail.com, password 123. This right here would be a user, so we can see that our password is just straight up 123. Name and email is fine. To do is also fine, but again, this is just not right. We should not have a password of 123. And actually, we don't need to add the IDs in here. We can just close that. So let's reload everything. Do this again. Let's see, we have webdev@ron 123. And yeah, there we go. So we have our to do and we have one ID. So we're going to go push it back in the models and fix this. This should be underscore ID. So now what we're going to do is use a tool called bcrypt.js, which is going to allow us to hash the password. Well, let's go ahead and install it. Bcrypt, make sure they spell this right, bcrypt.js, and we're going to press on enter. And so I'm not going to go too much in depth of how it works because I have a whole separate video on how to create a sign up and login page and all that kind of stuff. So you can go ahead and take a look at that video, but you're going to see what it does in just a second. So the first thing that we have to do is create a salt. So salt, which would be bcrypt.bcrypt.js. So fix this, bcrypt.js, bcrypt.js dot generate salt, and we're going to put 10 in here. That just means 10 different rounds. And then we're going to have our final hash password over here. Hashed password, which would be await bcrypt.js.hash our password salt. So there we go. For some reason, this async is not working, and that's because we have to add an await in here. And now if we set the password to be the hashed password, we're going to see a large difference. So if we press on sign up again, we can see that now our password is hashed, and it would be insanely difficult for a hacker to actually get the password. And so, of course, this makes it a lot more secure just in general. So now that we have our full users, so name, email, a hashed password, and to-dos with a default to-do, and of course the ID, we can go ahead and actually save that user. So to do that, we're going to write await new user dot save. And now that we have that, let's do this again. So sign up. And of course, it's not going to redirect us because we commented it out. But now if we press on sign up again, we're going to get a user already exists, because if we go back to MongoDB Atlas and refresh, we can see our first user. So that means that our page, of course, is working, but we do have to make a login page. So let's go ahead and actually just work on the login page. So login, and we're going to go back to here, go to app, login, and login is a lot more simpler than sign up. So we can go ahead and actually just copy and paste the login page.js. There it is. And then we can go to API, login, route.js, copy that too. And of course, I'll go over it too. So login, and then we're going to have our routes.js, paste it in here. So of course, we're going to have our email and password coming from the page. And here we're going to check if we have a user using the email. And if we don't, then we're going to say that the user does not exist. So if it doesn't find any users with the email provided, then it's going to give us this error message. Now it's going to validate our password using bgrip.js. So it's going to use a function called compare, which is going to use the password that we have passed down from the page, and then the hash password. So pretty much just compares the password. And if we're getting a false in here, then we're going to pass in a next response with invalid password and a status of 401. And then here, we're going to be actually creating a token, which we also have to do in the signup. And I'm going to go over that in a second. But here is where we're using the JWT secret key. And that's something that you want to keep a secret to yourself or your organization or that kind of stuff. But you want to make sure it's a secret so that it wouldn't be easy for hackers to actually break into someone's account. But of course, I'm just going to set this to gibberish. You can set this to whatever you want, but make sure that you write it down whenever you actually make your own website and upload it. But here we're going to be creating a variable called token data, and then it's using the ID of the user. So if the user wasn't found, then it's just going to return the next response. But if it was found, then we're going to create this token data with the ID of the user, the JWT secret key. And then we're going to have this variable called expires in 1 day. So in 1 day, this is going to be expired, and the middleware file is going to be checking all that stuff. But again, we're going to leave it like this for now. So now we do actually have to install another library, and that's another dependency, which is JSON Web Token. So npm install JSON Web Token. While that's installing, we're going to go to the signup and also create that token. So over here, after we save it, we're going to do the same thing. So const token data, and that would be JWT dot sign. And again, all of this stuff, I have a separate video on that. So you can go ahead and watch it if you want to. What is going on? Let's just import it from here. So import JWT. And then here we write JWT sign. We're going to set this to be ID, and then that would be equal to the user dot underscore ID. And we're going to be passing the process dot environment dot JWT. I'm just going to copy it, paste it in here. And then we're going to set expires in to be 1 day. And then now we're going to be creating a response variable instead of just passing it. So, and you'll see why in a second, but next response dot JSON. We can actually just go ahead and copy this. So there it is. And then here we're going to be returning the response. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take the response and we're going to set the cookies. So cookies.set, and it's pretty much the same with cookies like local storage. So local storage.set, cookies.set. Variable is going to be called token. And then the value of token is going to be the token data. And then we're also going to set HTTP only to be true. And so now, if we sign up or log in, this should work. So if I used a different email, Ron's, and we pressed on sign up, we see that we get redirected to the home page. And then if we go to application cookies, we have our cookies, so token, and then this right here. Now, if we do the same and we go to the login page, let's say I do some random characters at gmail.com, and then I set the password to be 123. If we press on login, we see that we get user doesn't exist because there's no user with this email. So now if we did web dev with Ron, I'm just going to copy this, go back in here, web dev with Ron, and I did a wrong password, so 1234, invalid password. So 123, and now we get the right password and our token is created. So we can see that this works, but of course we can go back to the login page if we wanted to, or to the sign up page. And let's say we weren't even logged in, right? We can still go to the home page. So to fix that, we have to create our middleware file. So we're going to go back in here and create our middleware file.js, and here we're going to start by exporting a middleware file, which would be an async function. And then here we're going to start by getting the path that we're currently on. So const path. And of course, if you don't want to create this file from scratch, you can go back in here and then find the middleware somewhere in here. I'm not exactly sure. Let's go back. It should be somewhere in here. So there, the middleware.js file. You can go ahead and copy it and paste it and then see the changes that we're going to make. But I'm going to create it from scratch. So const path, which should be request.nextURL.pathName. And then here we're going to create a variable called isPublicPath, which is going to check if the path that we're on is public. So if the current path is going to be at login or at signup, then it's going to be true, else it's going to be false. And you'll see why we need this in a bit. But now we're going to create a variable called token, which is going to get our cookies. So request.cookies.get. We're going to get a token.value. And so this right here is checking if we have a value in token. So we might have a token and for some reason the value is set to nothing, or we don't have a token. And of course, it's not going to be a value. But if it doesn't find any of this, then we're just going to set this to be nothing or blank. And now we're going to be checking if we're in a private path. So let's say this homepage right here, this can be a private path and we don't have a token. Then what we're going to want to do is return a next response. So next response dot redirect to a new URL, and now would go to login and request.url. Of course, you can set this to sign up if you want, but we're going to set this to login for now. But else, if we're in a public path and we have a token, so this is the same thing, but just flip, then we're going to go back to the home page. And now we have to do one more thing, and that would be going and writing export const config. And then here we're going to have a matcher with all of the URLs that we want this to work on. So we're going to have the homepage, login, and sign up. Let's see if this works. So right now, if we go to the application, we have no token, but if we create one by logging in, we can see that it's going to redirect us back, but we can't go to the login page anymore, or we can, and that's because of this, I'm pretty sure. But hold on, let's see. If we remove this token and we try to go back to the home page, it doesn't let us, but it lets us do it the other way around. And that's because we're missing something. That's my fault. We have to create a function called isToken expired. Then we're going to write token. So here we're going to have a try and catch method. Here we're just going to return true. If the stuff that we're doing here doesn't work, that just means that the token is expired. So const decoded token, this will be JWT decode token. And this is actually another thing that we have to install, which we're going to do in a second. And here we're just going to return an answer. So return decoded token dot expiration, or exp, is smaller than date.now divided by 1,000. And here we're going to write is public path and no is token expired token. And of course we have to install this, so we're going to write JWT decode, so npm install JWT, and we're going to have an underline here, and this should not be capitalized. So this is what the dependency looks like. So now we can install that, and hopefully everything will work now. So let's reload. Try to go to the home page, redirect us back to the login page. But if we log in, of course, we're going to go back to the home page. But now if we try to go to the login page, it's still going to let us. So, and of course it didn't work because we have to import JWT decode. So I'm pretty sure we got an error somewhere, but let's reload everything and try to do this again. Okay. Now if we go back to the login page, it's still going to let us do it. So I'm just not exactly sure what's going on in here. This had to be in curly brackets. And then we need 2 of those in both of them. let's see if it works now. So if we go to the login, it's going to redirect us back to the home page if we're logged in. But now if we delete this and reload and we try to go back to the home page, it's not going to let us. And one more cool thing that we can do is actually just go back in to the login and sign up. And then over here where we're setting the cookies, we can, here where we're setting the cookies and we're setting HTTP only to be true, we can set the max age of the cookie to be something, and it's going to be in seconds. So just going to do this. So it's pretty similar to, where is it at? This expires in, but expires in is used when you want this to be an exact date. And then max age is pretty much a countdown from whenever the cookie is set. So if we set this to be 10, that would mean that in 10 seconds this would expire, but let's just set it to 5, for example. Let's see how that would work. So if we load everything, let's actually do this for sign up and login. So let's do that. We're going to go to login, of course, refresh, login. Here's going to be our token. And after some time, now if I refresh, we can see that it's gone. And if we refresh the page, we're going to go back in here. And so, of course, this is set to 5 seconds, like I said before. So if we do 60 times 60 times 24, this would be equivalent to 24 hours. So it would have seconds and then times minutes, minutes times hours, and that would give us a day. And let's just go ahead and do this in both. So login and then also sign up. So there we go. And of course you can choose whichever one you want. So max age or the expires in. And I'm going to keep it like this because this would just override that unless this is smaller than the max age, but hopefully you get the point. And now that we are finished with that, let's actually go ahead and add our to-dos inside of the database, because currently if we add one, so let's just say add note and open the developer console, go to application, local storage, we can see that right over here we have our to-dos and then add note. So if we type anything in here, press on enter, we can see that that also gets added. And there's actually one more thing that we're also going to fix, and that's by adding IDs. So if we type in, let's just say ASD and then another ASD, we can see that obviously they're going to have the same content, but if we remove one, the second one also gets removed just because they have the same name, and that's how the system works. So we're going to be using IDs so that this doesn't happen. But the first thing that we're going to do is remove local storage from our page.js. So right here, we're going to remove this. And then inside of our to-do.js, we have to do the exact same thing also. So let's go ahead and do that. And the first thing that we're going to do is import Axios from Axios, just like that. And we're going to go to our add to do. And of course, we're going to go to our add to do. But before we do that, let's turn this into an async function. And then we're going to add a try and catch method right over here. Error, as always, in case we get any errors. And it's asking me if I want to fix it, which I do, but we're going to do it manually. So console log error, and then we're going to move this right over here, just like that. And one thing that we're going to do is remove this, because here we're just going to write await axios.post. And then here we're going to be going to API, to-dos, and then add, which we haven't created yet, but we will. And then we're going to have our to-do, which will be the to-do input. And you're going to see why we do this in a second, because we're going to be creating another function called get data. And then every time that we add a to-do, we're going to call this function, which will get us the data. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to manually create the ID, because whenever you create an object, as we can see over here, a new ID gets created, so it's a lot easier to just do that. And of course, receive all the data again with the new ID and that kind of stuff instead of creating it here. So for now, this is how it's going to work. And of course, we have to make an API endpoint for that. So we're going to go to API to-dos. And then we're going to have a folder called add. And of course, we're going to have a route.js file. And here we're going to start by importing next response. And then we're going to import connect from db-config. Let's connect to the database. And then we're going to export a const post function, which will be an async arrow function with a request. And in here, as always, try and catch method. So try catch error, and here we're going to return a next response.error, and also console log the error And so here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to see if we have a cookie, because if we don't, then we shouldn't be able to do any of that. So const ID, and that's going to be the ID from the token that we're going to be getting. So await get token data. And if I'm not mistaken, we don't have that right now because we haven't added that yet. So we have to create this function. So let's close the app for now. And then we're going to create a function called helpers. And inside of helpers, we're going to have a function called get token data.js. And then here we're going to import next response, not request, but response. And then also import JWT from JSON Web Token. And then we're going to export the get token data function with the request. And of course, we're going to have a try and catch method, as always, where we will console log the error and then return a next response.error. And then here we're going to create a variable called token, and we're going to be getting that from the cookies.get token. And we're going to check if we have a value in there. But if we don't, then we're just going to set it to be blank. And then we're going to be decoding the token. So decode token equals to jwt.verify token. And then we're going to use the process.env.jwt. Just going to go in here, copy this down, and then of course we will return the decoded token.id, just like that, or ID. There we go. Now if we go into our roy.js, let's go ahead and fix that. So route.js. After we get our token, we're going to try to find a user using the ID that was saved inside of our cookies. So await to user, which we do also have to import. .find by ID should be a lot simpler. .select, and you'll see what we're doing here in just a second, but password or null. Right over here, we're getting the user by the ID. And so by writing .select and then password, what we're saying here is we don't want to get the password. And so here we're going to check if the user exists. So if no user, then we're going to return a next response.json with a message of user not found and then status of 400. And then right over here, let's console.log the ID. And then also under that, we're going to console log the user. And then right over here, we will return a next response, which isn't going to have anything in there for now, but we're just going to say message to do added successfully and status of 200, just so that we can take a look at this without getting any errors. So let's go back in here, add note, we're just going to type something, and we're going to be getting an error right now. So ID await get token data. So of course we have to import this. Hopefully that will work now. So let's do the exact same thing. And there we go. So as we can see, the ID from our cookies matches the ID of our user. So of course it gets saved inside of the cookies, and then we're getting it from there. And then we're trying to find a user with the ID. And if we take a look over here, we can see that we do not have a password, and that's because we added this parameter in here. So if we set this to be, for example, _ID and do the exact same thing, add note, we can see that we're getting our user without the ID, but now we have the password. But of course we do want the ID, we don't want the password, so we're just going to do that. And everything should go back to normal. And before we go on, we have to fix a few more things, or else we will have a bunch of issues. So if we go to API, signup, and then route.js, in here we will remove the default to do just for now. We will add a few other ones later on. Then if we go to models, user model.js, in here we have to change this to mongoose.schema. So schema.types and then object ID. And now in here, we're going to be getting our to do from await request.json, and we're also going to be getting an ID, but we will only be getting an ID if it's from a to-do list that already existed. So what this means is whenever you click on a to-do, so for example, we had a to-do that said finish work. Let's say you press on it by accident and you didn't want to actually remove it. We're going to have a feature that you can press on a completed to-do, which will uncomplete it. And this to-do is already going to have an ID, so there's no reason to create another to-do with the same text and then a new ID. So we're just going to be passing in the to-do and the ID. But if we don't actually have an ID, then we're not going to be passing it, and then we're going to be creating it. So of course, we're going to create const new to-do, which would be dependent on the ID. So if we have an ID, make sure to not forget the underscore. Then the to-do will be to-do plus the ID. Else, we're going to create a to-do with the to-do being the to-do, and then the ID will be new mongoose. Make sure you import this from mongoose. So there it is. .types, .object, ID, and then round brackets, just like that. Now in here, we're going to get the user.todos, fix this, and then we're going to set that to be the previous user.todos, but we will add the new to do, and of course await user.save. And let's also right over here console.log our user.todos to see if this worked. So I'm gonna remove the cookie, reload, and over here I'm gonna delete everyone. So delete, and we're gonna start from scratch. So sign up, name is gonna be web. This is gonna be the email address. Password is 123. Sign up, and let's create our to-do. So let's just say finish work. Of course, we're not gonna see it, but if we go back in here, we're gonna have our to-do with a newly generated ID. And I just commented the ID out just so that you can see the difference. So this right here would be with the ID of new mongoose.types.object ID, and this one would be without it. So without it, it wouldn't create the ID. So that's just to show you how that works. But I'm gonna go to the to-dos and remove this guy right over here. So update, and of course we're gonna have our to-do, the one to do with the actual object ID. So there we go. Now we have to work on actually showing the to-dos. So this part is done. We can remove the console log, and we can go back to the to-dos and create a new folder called get. Here we're going to have a route.js file, and in there we're going to start from scratch again. So import next response, import connect, and then import user, and then we have another one which go back, import get token data, get token data, and then now over here we can export const get function sync with the request try and catch method as always. So here we're going to console log the error and then return a next response.error. And right over here we're going to do the same thing as we did over here. So we can actually just go ahead and copy this just like that, and then since all that we're doing is actually getting the user without the password, of course, we can just go ahead and return a next response.json with the to-dos of being user.todos. Or what we can do is actually send in the full user. Let's also send a message. So right over here, we can say that user is found, or we can say anything else, but let's actually just not send any message. And of course, we're going to have our status 200. But now, actually, we do have to connect to the database over here. So connect. And of course, now we can go back to the page.js file and fix anything else that we have to fix. So of course, right over here, we're going to create a function called getData, which will be an async arrow function. Of course, try and catch whenever we have anything to do with backend error. And then here we're going to console log the error. And then we're going to have our response await axios.get. This will be going to API and then to-dos, and of course get. And then right over here, what we're going to do is we're going to set user, which we do not have. So let's go ahead and fix our use states. So I'm going to create a new one called user, and then set user, which will be use state. And right over here, we're going to have all of our variables. So of course, we're going to have the name, which will be blank. Then we're going to have email, which will also be blank. And then we're going to have our to-dos. And since this is not exactly going to be what we're getting from the database, we can have our to-dos be an object with an array of incomplete and complete to-dos. So incomplete, and then our complete. So right, just like this. And of course, if you want to, you can do something like this, which will make it look nicer. Of course, here's our to-do with the incomplete and complete. And now we should be able to remove the to-do list, but let's see where we're actually using it. So of course, we're using it here, right over here. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to fix. But first of all, what we're going to do is go in here and we're going to set user right over here. We're going to set this to response.data.user. But then for the to-dos, that's going to be a lot different. So right over here, incomplete will be set to response.data.user.todos, just like that. And then complete will just be blank, or actually we can set this to ... user.todos.complete. And this might look a little bit confusing, but I'm going to go over this one more time. So we're setting our users to be stuff from response.data.user. So stuff like the name and email will be set automatically. Before the to-dos, here where we have the incomplete, what we're doing here is we're setting the incomplete to be all of the data that we have stored in the database. But for the complete ones, we're setting that to be to-dos from this use state that we have. So we're going to set that to be complete. And the reason we're doing this is because right over here, we're going to be getting the data every time we add a user. So you're going to see how this works in just a second. And it's showing me that we have an error or something, but everything is fine. So what we're going to do is wherever we have our use effect, we're going to write get data. And then right over here, we are going to console log the user, not the to-do list. So fix all of this. Let's reload, go to our console, and here's our user. So we have email, name, and we have our to-do. So of course the complete is not going to be, it's going to be empty for now. But for the incomplete, we have our to-do and the ID. If we add another to-do and we check again, we should still only have one to-do in the incompletes, and that's because we haven't updated it whenever we add a new to-do. So right over here, what we're going to do at the very bottom, we're just going to write get data just like that. And actually if we reload right now, we should have two to-dos right over here. So if we create one, which will just be ABC, and scroll down to-dos, we're going to see our latest to-do ABC. But now if we actually just comment this out, I'm not sure if we're going to be getting an error, but let's find out. So we have no error, which means we can remove this. But now we're going to work on this part right over here. So what I'm going to do is actually just erase all of this and go over this from scratch, because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to fix. We're going to start with the complete ones because we want the complete ones to be at the very top. So user.todos.complete.map. Here we're going to be getting the to-do and the index. And then right over here, we're going to be returning a to-do. So right here, to-do with a key, which will be the index. And let's actually close it so there's no errors. But we can actually create a variable which will be the props. And that will be stuff like the actual to-do, user, set user, and then is done. Okay, so actually is done will be set to true in this case. But then here we will return the to-do. And of course we have to put this inside curly brackets, just like that, so that there's no errors. Remove one spacing. And here we're going to have our props. And of course we're just going to be passing in ... props. And of course this is a lot cleaner than doing stuff like having the user to be equal to user and so on and so forth. But if we go back in here, there should be absolutely no errors. But now we can go ahead and copy and paste this. And this guy will be the incomplete, and it should be pretty much the same thing, but here this will be false. And let's see if any of that works. So currently we're getting some sort of error, so objects are not valid as a React child. Okay, so let's go to our to-do right over here, and we will fix everything. So of course this is the variables that we're getting now, so let's go ahead and fix that. And now we're going to have some sort of errors over here, so I'm just going to comment this out. Is done, it's going to be the same. To do should also stay the same. And now we're still getting an error. It might have something to do with the actual text, so let's remove it and console log the props. So what I'm going to do is just write props in here for now, and let's console log them and see if we're actually getting them, or if there's some sort of error occurring. So is done is not defined, but we have our to do. We have our is done is false, set user, which is a function, to do, which is finish work with the ID. And that's why we're getting the error, because of the to do. So let's see, if we go back in here, the to do will have right over here, we're going to set this to do, which will be to do, and then the underscore ID, and see if that works. Or actually we can just pass in the whole to do so that we have one variable instead of two. But now if we do this again and write to do, this should be fixed. Props not defined, of course. So we will comment this one out, and here's all of our text. If you don't want this to be to do, you can do something else like changing this to be to do, just like that, and then the actual ID, but we're not going to be doing that, so I'm just going to keep it like this. Or actually another thing you can do is just rename this. So you can do something like, if we go over here and write current to do, and then set this to be current to do, and then same thing with right here, and then same thing over here. If we reload, we're still getting some sort of error. Now would be reading to do, add to do, So current to do dot to do incomplete. Not exactly sure why we're getting the error, but everything is fixed now. So that's another way you can do that. But of course, this is all up to you. So if we're doing this here, might as well do the same thing over here, current to do. And now that we have that done or out of the way, one thing that I do want to do is add that feature. Or actually, before we do that, we have to make this work first. So the done to do. So first thing that we're going to do is actually just erase this and create our new list. So new list, and here we're going to have our incomplete. And so our incomplete will be set to user.todos.incomplete, incomplete.filter. And here we're going to filter out the current to do. So let's just write to do. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking if the to do dot underscore ID doesn't equal to current to do dot underscore ID. So what it's going to do is it's going to take a look at all of the incompletes inside of the user.todos. And if the ID matches to the current to do that we're passing in, then what's going to happen is it's just going to remove it. So the incomplete is going to be all of the to-dos without the to-do that we just removed, which means that we can set the complete ones. So complete to be the previous user.todos.complete with the current to-do that we have. So just like that, we can close that. And right over here, we're going to actually just set user to be, of course, the previous user, and then we're going to set the to-dos to be the new list, and then of course we're going to send an API request, so axios.post, and this will go to API to-dos and then remove, which we haven't created yet, but we will. And then the to-dos, we're going to put that in round brackets, or sorry, curly brackets, will be new list.incomplete. So just like that. And of course, we're going to be getting an error because this has to be an async function for us to use await. And this should be it for the front end. But now we're going to go back to the to-dos, create a new folder called remove route.js file. As always, we're going to create a route.js file. And then in here, we're going to import everything again. So let's go to get, copy this, paste it right over here. Let's connect to the database, and then we're going to export const host function, async request. As always, we're going to have our try and catch method in case we get any errors, and then we're going to console log it, and then we're going to return a next response. Right over here, let's actually go back to the get, and then we're going to copy this because we're going to do the exact same thing, right? We're getting the user if it exists. If not, we're sending a user not found. But either way, now we can get our to-dos from await and then request.json, and then we're going to set user.todos to be simply just the to-dos, and then await user.save. And then we will have to return a next response.json. Here we're going to set the message to be to do removed successfully with a status of 200. And let's also console.log the user.todos to see if that works, so that we don't have to go to the MongoDB. But currently we have our finished work and then this gibberish and ABC. If we press on ABC, Axios not defined. So of course, very simple error to fix. Let's find Axios right over here. Let's import it and do this again. So ABC. And if we take a look here, we can actually see that we only have 2 to-dos in our incomplete, but at the very start we had 3, so that means that it actually did remove it from the database. But we can take a look in VS Code 2, and we have our first to-do and our second to do, so instead of 3 that we originally had. Now if we go in here, we can remove that, and then what we are going to do is add that feature that I was talking about. So to do that, we're going to change this a bit. So if is not done, then we're going to do all of this. Let's move this inside. So there we go. I'm going to put it at the very top over here, and then we're going to write else. It means that it's done, so we're going to set is done to be false. And then we're going to have a new list again. It's pretty much just going to be flipped. So we're going to set our incomplete to be ... user.todos.incomplete. And then of course the current to do, but then the complete is going to be the exact same thing that we had in here. So let's go ahead and copy that, paste it in here, and we're going to change this guy to be complete instead of incomplete. And that should be it for the new list. But if we set the user to be previous user and then to do and a new list, and then we write await axios.post, and then we're going to go to API, or sorry, let's fix this, API to-dos, and then add, and we can pass in the current to-do. And I'm not sure if that will work, but let's see if it does. So we have a finished one, and if we press on it again, we can see that it gets added back. So if we press on finish work, we have only one to do right over here. But if we press on that again, we can see that it's back. And we're doing all of that with the IDs, which means that if we had, let's just say 2 ABCs, I'm not sure what just happened with this guy. Let's reload. Yeah, it's gone. But if we have 2 ABCs now and I press on one of them, we can see that we're going to have only one ABC. But if we press on that again and go back in here, we should have 3 ABCs and of course 2 different IDs. If we reload, something happened over here. So let's take a look at the database and see if there's some sort of issue. So we're only going to be getting the ID and not the to do. So of course now, since we're using the current to do, we're going to have to set the to do to be current to do dot to do, and then the ID to be current to do dot dot underscore ID, and that should work now. So let's reload, let's press on ABC, press on it again, reload, and everything should be working again. So let me add a few ones. Now if we press on some of them and then undo all of them and reload, we can see that everything still works perfectly well. And we can actually go back to the page.js file, remove the console log so that we don't have it. And now if we actually go ahead and delete all of them, or almost all of them, we can see that they disappear. So our new feature finally works. But now what we're going to do is actually add a button over here that when we press will just sign us out. And I'm going to actually demonstrate how this works. So we can see that this is 3001 and this is 3000. So this is the complete version. But if I create a user right over here, or already exists, so let's just log in. So there we go. This is what it's going to look like, or something similar to this, but we can see this button over here, and when we press on it, it's going to sign us out. So it's pretty simple, but it's a pretty nice feature that we can add. So of course, if we close the app, go to public, we can see this signout.svg, and that's where it's from. So what we're going to do is go back to the page.js file, and right over here, so somewhere in here, I'm not sure what's going on, but pretty sure this should look like that. But either way, we have our to-do content, and right where we have our h1, here we're going to create a div with a class of padding right of 4 and then margin bottom of 2, or sorry, margin top of 2. We're going to put the h1 in here, and we're also going to create an image element. So image, of course, we have to import it from Next.js. The source, so source will be signout.svg, and then let's fix a few things. So width will be 46. Same goes for height. Then we're going to have a class name of position relative, so just relative, float, and cursor will be pointer. So whenever you hover it, you're still getting this because we have to set the alt to be something. Yeah, so we're just going to set this to sign out, but cursor is going to be pointer. Then we're going to set the brightness to be 90, and then on hover we're going to set the brightness to be 100. And then one more thing, we're going to set this to be transition all, and we're going to set the brightness to be something lower, so maybe until we have 90 and then 75. So let's try 75, see what that would look like. So let's log in, see if we have an account. We do, so there it is. And whenever you hover it, the brightness changes a little, but the problem is that it's a lot less bright as this. So of course you can play around and set this to whatever you want, but I'm just going to set this to be 90, just like that. But now if we take a look at it, we can see that the to-do list is a little bit to the left. So if we remove the image, we can see it move back to the center. So there's a few things that of course we have to fix. So first thing that we're going to do is remove the margin top from the h1 because we don't need that anymore. And actually, let's also add the user.name since we can do that. And here, if we try to do this, we're going to get an error. So we're going to copy that, paste it in here, and now it should look like this. So I'm not sure why we do not have a name. So right over here we're getting an error, I think. So it's in the to-do list app API. That's to do with the token. So I'm guessing we don't have a token anymore, or we do, but it's not working anymore. So what we're gonna have to do is, if it's not working anymore, then we're just gonna have to delete it, and then it would log us out. But let's log in again and see if that works. So here is Web's to-do list. It's just a tiny feature that we do have a space. So I'm not sure why it's not added in here too. So if I do double space, now that works. But we can still see that it's a lot more to the left than it is to the right. So to fix that, what we're going to do is simply just add a padding left of 4, since we have the padding right of 4. Or actually, let's just set this to padding x of 4, and this to padding left of 4. and see how that looks. So there we go. Now we can see that this is centered. And of course, if sign out is not going to work right now, but if the text here was a lot longer, so if this wasn't just web, it was some random letters, it would look something like this. So of course you would have to add some sort of thing that would counter that. Let's go to the page and just set this to be my of 2, which will space things a little bit more. And I think we should be able to change the sizing here. So this is what the default will look like. So maybe we can set this to be a little bit larger. So text 3XL. Of course, this is not going to work in here. So we're going to go back in here, change this to 3XL. So there it is. And maybe, let's see, we have padding 1. Maybe if we set this to padding 2, so px of 2 and then py of 1, that would look much better. So there we go. And now let's actually work on the button, since nothing is happening whenever we click it. So we're going to go back in here. We have our image, and we don't really have to make a button. So let's just add an onClick over here. OnClick, we're going to run a callback function called handle sign out, and we're going to go ahead and create it. So let's move this use effect to the very top, so right over here. Then we have our get data, add note, and let's have our sign out right over here, const handle sign out, and this will be an async function, of course. So try catch error, and then we're just going to console log the error. And right over here, we're just going to wait axios.post, and then we're going to go to API, and of course, sign out. And then we're going to move the user to a different page or reroute. So we can actually remove the to-do list from here. And then we're going to import use router from Next navigation, and then const router, which will be use router. And right over here, we're going to run router.push, and we're going to push the user to log in. Or what we can do is just push the user to the home page. And since they're not going to have the cookies anymore, it's just going to go straight up to the middleware, and whatever you've set this URL to be, then that's where it's going to push it to. Then that's where it's going to push the user to. So this should be it. Now we're going to go to the API, and then we're going to create a folder called sign out, and then we're going to create our route.js file inside. And there's not going to be much stuff, so we can just import next response, and then of course export const post, which will be an async function. And we're going to be getting the request, and then we're going to run try and catch, get the error, console log the error, and then return next response.error. Else we're just going to create a response variable, which would be next response.json with a message of user signed out successfully, status of 200, and then here we're going to write response.cookies.set be token. We're going to set that to blank, and then we're going to say HTTP only, set that to true, and then we're going to set max age to be 0. And also, if you had the expires, we can also do that. So expires, new date, we're going to set that to 0. And now this should hopefully work. Of course, we do have to return the response, and let's see if that works. So if we press on the sign out, we can see that we have been successfully signed out. But now there's one thing that we do also have to fix, and that is that if we're logged in and, for example, I don't know, something happened to the user and it was deleted, and we go back in here and reload, we can see that we're not getting any information, but for some reason we're still logged in, and that's because of the cookie. So we can see that it's still here, and in here we're saying that failed to load resource, the server responded with this and that, and that's because of the cookie and nothing is found. And it's quite simple to fix this. So right over here, if we don't have a user, it's going to return that. But before we do it, what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable, so const response, which will be equal to next response.json, and then response.cookies.set. And then we're going to set this to exactly what we set it to be inside of the sign out. So this, and then we will return response. And let's see if this works. So now if we reload, we're still going to get our error, but if we reload again, then it's going to sign us out. So to fix that, what we're going to do is we're going to go inside of here, and we're going to say if response.status equals 404, I'm pretty sure, 404, then we will router.push and see if that works. So let's create a new user, web, sign up. We're going to go back in here, refresh, and then delete the user, and then refresh. We're getting all of our errors. Response is not defined, and that's because we have to use error inside of here because we're not getting the response. So error.status equals 404, and that should be it. So sign up, email address, password 123, refresh, delete the user. Of course, if we refresh now, we're going to get automatically redirected back to the login page. So that works. And so now it finally works. And of course, there's one more thing that we have to add, and that's the default notes so that users know how to use this. But it's in the signup route.js. And here where we have our to-dos, we're going to create a few templates. So the first one, we're just going to set the to-do to be number 1, and we're going to set this to create your first to-do. And let's also add an ID, so _ID, new mongoose.types.object_id, and we can actually just do it like that. And then we're going to have our second to-do, so number 2, press on me to complete, and of course we're going to have an ID. Then we have another to-do, and in here we can write when completed, I'll be removed when reloaded. That just means whenever the page is reloaded, then the to-do will be removed. And let's also create another one, so to-do, and then this guy will be number 4, and we can write if misclicked, click me again to add back. So that's the new feature that we added. So if misclick, click me again to add back, and let's see if that worked. So of course, if we refresh, let's go ahead and delete this user and see if this works again. So reload, and there we go, we get redirected back to this page. Press sign up, name, email address, password 123, and we might be getting some sort of error. So let's open it. We do have an error, so it's right over here, and it just says that mongoose is not defined. So that's, again, very simple error. So import that, and now if we press on sign up, everything worked, and we have all of our to-dos. Create your first to-do, press on me to complete, and of course, if misclicked, click again to add me back. And so there we go. I did mess up the order, so let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, we can add our own, so let's just say finish homework, and then we can say number 1 because we can delete these ones, so delete this. And if we reload, we're going to have finished homework. And of course, one thing that we can also do is whenever we write a new to-do, so if we write something random, we can have a few options maybe on the side, so have it numbered or any of that kind of stuff. But again, this is just a very basic template of this, so I would like you to add your own features and play around and just learn how to use backend and front end together to develop your skills. And now there's one more thing that's left to do, and that would be to add a loading animation. So if you reload, we can see that there's nothing and then everything shows up. And inside of the CSS, we already have this loading animation, but if you want to go ahead and add a different one, I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. But what I'm going to do is go back in here to our page.js file, and right over here, or actually before we go there, we have to create a use state. So const, and then we're going to have loading, and then set loading, and that will be set to false. Let's fix this, and then we're going to go right over here, and then we're just going to cut this out, and in here we're going to say loading. If loading is true, then we're going to load a component that we haven't created yet, but loader, or else we're going to paste all of this, or actually we have to paste it inside of our empty tag over here. And now we shouldn't have any errors. So let's space everything out just like that. And actually, I'm going to put this one down so it looks like this. And let's space everything out. So, and what I'm going to do is actually just do this, go back in here, and everything looks pretty well. But now let's go to our components. So let's close the API, components, loader.js, and then we're going to run rafce, and then we're going to go to the index.js file, import loader, and then we will also add the loader in here. And since we already have the CSS for a Pacman loader, we're just going to write it down in here. So this one is pretty long, but it's going to be loading GIO, spinner, and then bean, eater. And then if we go to the CSS class, scroll to the very bottom, we can find this class right here, and we're just going to copy that. Go to the loader, and then we can paste it in here. Tailing classes, so mx of auto, and then item center. And here we're going to create another div with a class name of this right here. We're going to paste it, and here we're going to have a bunch of divs. So we're going to have a div with a div inside, and then outside of that we're going to have another div, and then in this div we're going to have 1, 2, and then 3 divs. And this should be it. So if we go in here and then to do, and then we can also import the loader. Let's see if it works. So if no loading, then it's going to show it. So there it is. All that we're going to have to do now is add a few more classes in here that will depend on the loader. So after rounded, actually we're gonna have to cut this out and then paste it again like this. And then here we're gonna write loading. Then we're gonna add a class of items center, else it's gonna be blank. And I'm gonna fix this real quick. So there we go. And if we reload, let's inspect everything and see if we missed anything. So we can see that this still doesn't work. And that's because we have to go back in here and then set this to true. So that's a small mistake, but there we go. So now it's in the middle, and whenever it's loading, we're gonna have this nice little cool Pac-Man loading animation. And then whenever we get our data, so here we're gonna write set loading false. And when we reload, whenever we get all of our data, we can see that it shows up. But before that, we have this Pac-Man loading animation. But if you wanted to add your own, so for example, there's this one right here. All you have to do is copy the HTML, go to the loader. So let's scroll down, loader. I'm just going to comment this out, paste this in here, and then we're going to copy the CSS. And this website actually has a lot better HTML and CSS than the one that I used to find that loader, but it's totally fine. So we can paste that in here. And then if we reload this one, we can see that it's going to be right in there, which just means that we're just going to have to fix the styling a little bit. But here we're going to fix the class name, and then let's copy this class, paste it in here, and now it's going to be in the middle. And of course, you can go back in here and then change the colors or anything else. So we can set this to be blue, and then we can set the width and height to be something larger, so maybe 64 pixels. Copy and paste that in here, reload, and now it's going to be much larger. We can also change the border, so maybe 10 pixels, and see what that would look like. So there it is. And so I think what I'm going to do is actually keep this loading animation, since it's a lot cleaner than this one, as we can see. So what I'm going to do is actually just delete it. So from keyframes, so I'm going to select this, go all the way down to here, and just go ahead and delete it. And actually this right here was where I got the loading animation from. So you can go ahead and click it, and also check out this website. So there's a bunch of different ones, of course. And here is the Pac-Man one. You can change colors, palettes, and that kind of stuff. But as we can see, the code on this one is much cleaner. So let's remove that, go back, and then reload, and there it is. And if you do want to make this website a lot nicer, I suggest making a homepage. So when you're logged in, then the to-dos would be this homepage. And then whenever you're not logged in, then this would be the homepage. But of course, you can access it whenever you're not logged in. And in here, you're going to be using local storage, and it would have the same button as we have here, but for login. And then you can have a message saying something like, if you want to access this data from any device, then log in and then do this and that. But the default homepage would be the local storage. And then if you press this button right here, then it would go to the sign up page or login, depending on what you want to open. And then whenever you logged in, then it would go to -to-dos. And then this would be the one where you actually use the database and that kind of stuff. But of course, you would have to change stuff in the middleware and that kind of stuff. So just a small project idea, because currently if we're not logged in, so if I sign out and go to the homepage, we don't even have a homepage. So users are not going to know what this website is about. So this is going to be the end of this video. So I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, then make sure to leave a like, subscribe to not miss upcoming content like this. And we are going to make a Chrome extension that is pretty much the same thing as this, but just as a Chrome extension, and both of them do connect. So you can add to-dos on the Chrome extension, and then it's going to display it on this page. But of course, if you want to get notified, then make sure that you subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions or if you have anything else that you'd like to say, and hopefully see you in the next video.